Hello, my name is AJ Felich, and I am reviewing the book End of the Spear for cross-cultural communications class. The reason I chose this book is because back in I think it's fifth or sixth grade, I read a book for a book report called Shadow of the Almighty, which is basically an autobiography about the missionary named Jim Elliot. Jim Elliot basically was one of five people that was murdered when ministering to an Ecuadorian tribe deep in the jungle. The tribe was a very violent people. They had a lot of different cultural, I don't know, pinpoints, I would say, that stick out differently from what we are used to. It was a very uncivilized way of living. Violence was a bad and very obvious tendency that they expressed through quite a lot of um, both the book and the movie adaptation, which is part of the reason that I picked this book. Was that there was also a movie done in 2005, not the greatest movie in the world, but it was done on this book, and I did watch it as a kid, and it did. I mean, it is a pretty good, touching movie, but acting and everything. Basically, so some of the key points I want to go over here. We'll start with kind of my evaluation, and I'll just start by really saying it is a solid read. Um, at the end of the day, it's a story about five men who their main goal was to reach a group of people that had not been reached yet, and to do that, they had to A, conquer the language that none of them knew, and B, make contact with a people that had literally never been made contact with. These were people that lived deep in the heart of the jungle in Ecuador. I'm not sure if I pronounced this right, but the Auca people, basically. Um, and like I said, they were prone to violence, so there were a lot of things that were going against these men, but it did not deter them from continuing to try to reach these people. And so basically, the book is written by the son of Nate Saint. Nate Saint was one of the five people that was speared to death when trying to reach these people. And Steve Saint writes this whole book from his perspective, and he actually goes back to these peoples years and years and years later when he's fully grown. Because, for the longest time, he had no idea what happened to his father. They had just found his body with the others, and they just assumed they'd been killed. They didn't know it was by these specific people. So he writes this book kind of through his eyes and how he saw it as a kid, and includes different narratives from different people, and it's just really powerful. I think it's a good read, but there are different levels of cross-cultural themes that you kind of see pop up. And we kind of talk about language dominance, style, communication, differences, connections, stuff like that within our little poster assignment. But I think that each of those actually do stand out within the book. I think connections have a lot of themes that we've seen before, like darkness, cultural boundaries. Religion is probably the biggest one, because these people didn't really. I mean, it was kind of a system of gods, kind of a typical, not to stereotype, but like a native belief system. That one supreme being could not exist. It was multiple, and it was for every different aspect of the world. Human nature is kind of the biggest thing here. Steve Saint kind of relies on quite a bit. Is obviously you see throughout his writings and even the movie, if you've seen it. It's very apparent that the fallen nature of people and humans is evident in a lot of the areas that this book covers. So basically, I'll just kind of go over these points real quick just to explain kind of what it is saying right here. But for language, the book is written as a narrative. It's kind of explaining, the lives of these guys, why they did what they did, and how they did it. It's crazy, and not to explain the whole book, but basically they started to contact these people by dropping chickens and dropping gifts in baskets, because Jim Elliot was a pilot, and so he was able to get a little crop duster and take one of his buddies up with him, and they'd drop basically a basket, a rope with a basket with a chicken or some kind of supplies in it. And these people didn't know what the airplane was. They didn't know who these people were, but they began to build trust in them because they were giving them gifts. And eventually one day they landed and they made contact, and great progress was being made until what is explained in the movie to be a great misunderstanding occurs. It's really unknown to us what happened, why the tribe's people were upset, but they ended up basically spearing all of them to death not long after they had first made contact. So it's a very tragic story, but it does depict very well the different cultural boundaries that these men had to conquer. Dominance just talks a little bit about the tribe's, hierarchy, and they were very leader-heavy culture. The style of writing, like I said, it's a narrative. The communication types, that was the biggest boundary, and it is the number one boundary between cultures is communication, language, and that presented a tough hurdle. Differences, a lot of the differences in this book are just best illustrated through the way that the tribal people live. I mean, it's a very uncivilized way of life. People running around with barely any clothes on at all, living in mud huts and killing deer with spears. So it's a very interesting connection there. All in all, to kind of conclude here, this is a great book, a great read that I think very evidently displays different cross-cultural boundaries that not only occur just to missionaries, but are also very present in simple day-to-day interactions. And even if it's not anything nearly as tragic as being speared to death, it is still the same on a smaller level of having to communicate when you have certain boundaries in your way. And I think this book shows that it's good to push through and do the best you can. Thanks.